Yay! Hi, everybody. Welcome to Being Becca Live. It is Wednesday at 11 a.m., which means we are all gathering here to talk about what it's like to be an autistic adult alive right now and what those challenges are like, and what we're kind of doing to deal with it. So, I just finished doing the June STL seminar. Of course, they had tech problems because whatever, that happens. But I managed to get through it, and I think it went okay. Well, whatever. I'm excited about it. And I'm excited to do it again because I actually, as I ran through it, I was like, this is a really good presentation. Like, a lot of people need this information. So if you missed the June's SDL seminar, Decision Making Decoded, the recording will be up by the end of this week, if not today, to purchase, and you're more than welcome to watch it then. I happen to think that it's an important topic and we don't talk about it enough, and so hopefully folks found it helpful. But welcome to Being Back Alive. I'm Becca Lori Hector, your host here for today, and what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit layered, and I haven't, as always, figured out all the layers. Hey, Burnett. I haven't really figured out the layers of all of it yet, but it's something that's sort of been, I don't know, meandering through my mind, and it's something that I want to talk a little bit about. So something we hear a lot in the news lately, and it's a kind of a new-ish buzzword that I want to talk about. Hey, Bernard, is microaggressions. That's the word I wanted to talk about. So this is a newish term, and we talk about it right now. I think the most common way we hear it talked about is in terms of racism, and that and I guess we do talk about it some when we talk about the LGBTQIA community as well, right? So what are microaggressions, right? Well, microaggressions are little things that happen to you throughout the day that are the little, like, needling things that people do or say to you that they don't realize is offensive, right? That they don't realize is a way of really sort of insulting you. And so microaggressions by themselves are sort of kind of vanilla-y. It's sort of like a white lie-ish, because a lot of times when people are doing microaggressions, they don't even realize that it's something they shouldn't be doing, right? And so it's not like a true aggressive behavior when someone's like, I'm going to do this mean thing to somebody else, right? It's just something that happens out in the world that's a result of, sort of your place in society. So when we talk about microaggressions, we've been talking about it in that way, but I want us to talk about it in terms of autism, because I don't even want to talk about it in terms of the greater disability community, because those of us who have invisible illnesses have a different set of microaggressions that we deal with, right? It can be really infuriating for people who use a wheelchair, for example, to get somewhere and find out there's no wheelchair access, right? But when you are someone with an invisible disability and you choose to wear your sunglasses inside because the lights are too bright for you, right? And someone says, oh, no sunglasses inside, right? Or someone says, what were you out drinking last night that you can't have your regular glasses on, or whatever? Those are little tiny microaggressions, right? They make us feel self-conscious and self-aware about a thing we're doing to take care of ourselves, right? And so we get those a lot. A lot of the microaggressions that I think autistic people deal with are wrapped up in other packages, right? A lot of the microaggressions are often sold to us as supports or good advice or general skill sets. Sometimes we get them in social skills classes, right? But we hit microaggressions all the time. Some of the ones we don't think about as microaggressions, but definitely are things like, you don't look autistic, right? When you tell somebody, right? Or, what do you mean you use a device to communicate? Sometimes, what do you mean you go mute, right? And those little invalidations of our real experience, right? Those are the things that I consider to be autistic microaggressions. There are more, I know there are. I mean, in the workplace, I could probably come up with about 25 of them, right? And so what we see as a result of those microaggressions over the course of a lifetime is that they have become a trauma, right? And so it's like these little things are happening, little things 10 times a day for decades, right? So we're looking at, for me, 45 years of microaggressions, right? 45 years of them. And together, collectively, they have become a trauma, right? That fear, that awareness, that anxiety, the anticipation of those tiny microaggressions, right, are a piece of trauma, right? And we do the masking, and see, here it comes, the connections, right? And I think we do the masking as a way to protect ourselves from those microaggressions, because they don't feel good, first of all, but the accumulation of them through your day, right, is exhausting. And the way for us to save the spoons is to mask, so they don't have to make the microaggressions, so we don't have to deal with the microaggressions, so we can save some spoons. Did I do that in a long, right? And it just sounds to me like another place where we are uncomfortable so that everyone else can be comfortable, right? That's how it feels to me, as another space where that happens. And the reason I started thinking about this was because I live in a kind of strange state, right? I live in Colorado, and it's like really, really, it's turning a little bit more blue, but it's really, really down the middle between people who are very conservative and very liberal. So I overheard a conversation where someone was talking about Juneteenth, right? We all, I hope, know what Juneteenth is. It's the day that the United States has finally decided to officially recognize what people suffered through with slavery. And so we're finally acknowledging that, and we've given ourselves a federal holiday and all of these things. So I heard, and of course, everyone has to have an opinion, ladies and gentlemen. Not that their opinion is going to do anything, but everyone's got to have an opinion. So I'm listening to this conversation, and as the conversation's going on, I'm hearing the typical argument, right? But it was so long ago. These people don't have anything to be angry about. They have lived, a great life. They have all these things available to them. They weren't slaves, right? So we hear that argument, right? And that's sort of but what this other person wasn't understanding is that the result of years of slavery are all of these microaggressions that still exist out in our world. And the idea of creating a day to talk about it, acknowledge it, all of those things is a piece of inclusion, right? It's about saying, I hear you. You've been suffering from these microaggressions. We got to do better, right? It's a way to be saying that. And so what I want to be doing is something like that. Like, it's not okay that I have to deal with all these microaggressions. It's not okay that over the course of all of these decades, not only was I misdiagnosed and not diagnosed correctly ever until recently, right? Until I got my autism diagnosis, but also now I have all of this trauma. And now that I know about my autism, that trauma isn't going anywhere, right? It's not going to change. Those microaggressions are still out there. Just because I know I'm autistic now, it doesn't change the microaggressions, right? And so even though I know I have trauma from that, I also know that the rest of my life will be filled with small trauma from that, right? It's not going anywhere anytime soon, right? I mean, I'm 45. What are the chances that it's going to disappear, brothers? And so much of my life has already been damaged by it. So it's like big thoughts about this thing, big thoughts about kind of where we sit as a community. When will people begin to look at us as a civil rights-based community? When will we begin to be seen as people and not a diagnosis, so that we can ask for the end to those microaggressions, right? But in the meantime, what I think we're looking at is an entire community filled up to the brim with CPTSD. So if you don't, PTSD, CPTSD. Thank you. There it is. Because what we talk about when we talk about CPTSD is the complex trauma. What we're talking about is not a singular event that caused you trauma, but multiple little repeated events that cause you trauma. And when we do that, we have a more complex version of PTSD to deal with. And so what I want to talk to people about, I don't want to say everybody go run out and get your PTSD diagnosis, because I'm not running out to get one. But what I am doing is beginning to read more about trauma-informed things, and to think more about the results of these microaggressions, and to think more about how I'm going to move forward in my life knowing that they're going to be there, right? How do I deal with that, with trauma that is ongoing? That's the idea, right? It's ongoing trauma. It's not going anywhere. And how do I ride the PTSD bus with that, right? And how do I kind of get through that? And so some of it, I think we have some control over. Some of it is about really being picky and careful about where we choose to spend our spoons and time and energy, right? Are we doing it at a job that we are not appreciated at, that is full of microaggressions all the time? Or are we doing it at a job where we are free to be our authentic selves, right? Are we in relationships like that? Are we in families like that? Are we in towns like that? Are we choosing those environments for ourselves so as to minimize the future of our trauma, right? Or are we sort of accepting it in this way and as kind of part of the way of being an autistic person? And I think that's not okay. I think that's where we need to draw a line. I think we need to say no, right? Like not that I'm trying to say we need our own Juneteenth, because that's a ridiculous statement to make. But you know what? It's that idea. We need an acknowledgement of our inclusion. We need to be seen as a group of humans that have civil rights issues, rather than a group of humans that have a diagnosis on our foreheads, right? And so, and I think again, I'm going to bring back the LGBTQIA community, because they were dealing with a similar thing for a really long time. We thought gayness could be cured, and we thought that people could change and they could get rid of it, right? And people were medicated for it like it was a disease, right? And what I'm asking for is what happened for them, and for us to be acknowledged as a group of people, a group of human beings, right? And that we are collectively experiencing trauma as a group, and we need to collectively as a society say it's not okay to do that to people. It's not okay to, through microaggressions over the lifetime, create an entire group of people who are traumatized, right? And who have these issues to deal with now. So that's sort of where I've been at with the whole thing. It feels very big and philosophical to me. I haven't gotten very far with it because I feel like I'm still struggling with my own. But can you see, as like I see all the layers of it? Do you see how it begins so early, those microaggressions, and the response that we give to that is to mask ourselves, so as to eliminate the microaggressions, rather than saying your microaggressions aren't okay, you need to stop, right? And so that's where I'm at. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. I would love to know if this is a topic that you're interested in, because it's one that I feel like I'm starting to get sucked into a little bit, reading a little bit more about trauma, reading a little bit more about just the generalized information on trauma. Fuck the autism. I threw that aside because that's not what I'm looking for. What I want to know is, what do neurotypicals do? What is the neurotypical advice for dealing with these microaggressions, dealing with microaggressions that aren't going anywhere, and the continued trauma? What is it that they tell each other to do, right? And what can I take from that for us to learn? Is there anything valuable in it for us, or is there something else I need to be looking for? Because it's not okay. Yes. Oh, Bernard, that's such a great way to say it. Bernard said, these microaggressions have given us a cultural trauma. Yes. Right. So yes, let's include that word, right? Because we are developed. We already have developed our own culture, and it's continuing to grow. And that's, again, that piece of being seen as people, right? A group of people with something in common, rather than a group of people with a disease, right? And so I really think, there's something to that. We're allowing the world, through these microaggressions, to give us collective cultural trauma. It's terrible, right? That our natural culture that we're building isn't allowed to be itself, that we're even told that we need to fix that. I mean, it's really complicated for me, and it feels emotional, and it feels layered, and it feels like I have unpacking to do about it. I don't know about you guys. Burnett says microaggressions are frustrating, especially because people don't seem to be aware of their behavior, and I can get in trouble for my reaction to them. Yes, right? Those microaggressions hurt, and depending on the kind of day you're having and how you feel about receiving that information, right? Your response to that is going to be different. And oftentimes when we're tired of dealing with it, we respond with aggression in return, right? And I don't think that's the way for us to handle it. I don't think that that's the healthiest way for us to produce through it, right? I think it's kind of struggling. Oh, Bernard says similar to the cultural trauma slavery has caused. Yes, right. So that's where I found the comparison in my head, right? Was that cultural trauma that slavery has caused, right? Trying to explain to this person who doesn't understand that, yes, it's all these generations later, and no, these people personally haven't been slaves, but the microaggressions that have come from that time still exist. And those people are still being traumatized in small ways because of that. And when we acknowledge those microaggressions through days like Juneteenth, right, we're acknowledging that as a society, we're allowing these people to have collective trauma. And we need some relief, right? We're next in line, please, right? That's how I feel about it. And yes, and CV says yes, and it's so embedded in the medical community. Yes, right? So because the way that we look at autism is through, well, the majority is through that medical model. And if instead we place it in a social model and we look at autism as not a disease or a defect or something that needs to be cured or fixed or those things, but we look at it as a variation of humankind in the same way that we all have different color skin and that people have different sexual orientation and genders and all of those things. Right. But right now we're still stuck in this little medical world where people put us there. Right. And that's the box that we're living in. And even that we live under this umbrella of the medical model is trauma. Right. That's still, those are those microaggressions. The very idea of the medical model is a microaggression. Right. I mean, it kills me. Yes, and CV said, and that is the bottom line, CV. This is the bottom line. The bottom line is that seeking help should not cause more trauma, but it does, right? Because of these microaggressions, because of the miseducation, because of the lack of information, because of all of these things. We know why, but that if we don't fix the why, we're not changing the behavior. The behaviors are still existing, right? And so it is. It shouldn't cause more trauma. Once you realize you have trauma, you should be able to deal with it. You shouldn't have to deal with your past trauma and also prepare for your future trauma, which is essentially what we're living in right now. That's how we're living our lives, is we're preparing for that next trauma. And so any healing that we'd like to do with our CPTSD, right, and a healing around that trauma, we can't do because every time we step out of our houses, those wounds get reopened by microaggressions, right? That's where I'm at in the whole thing. Burnett says it does. I was invalidated by the medical professionals when seeking a diagnosis, which discouraged me, and I no longer want a diagnosis. Thank you. Right? It is when we judge or invalidate or criticize, especially when we're looking at the medical community or the psychological community, right? We need to be careful. What we often do is when people are at their most vulnerable and they're seeking treatment and may not have sought treatment before, and we create a bad experience through microaggressions, right? That person is no longer going to seek help, right? That's what we've done. We've kind of turned off that spigot for them. And we can't do that to each other. And we can't accept that as treatment that we're allowing anymore. We need to put a foot down. We need to say we're human beings. And much like the LGBTQIA and much like the Black community before them, we would like to be acknowledged for our humanness. We are aware of this thing that makes us different, but we're also aware that that the difference is natural. It's a naturally occurring difference. And so what we need to do is figure out a better way to function around that as a society. And to me, it comes all the way down to the little seedling in society that is seeking sameness, right? We have an entire society built on the desire for sameness. And until we let that go, these microaggressions are going to exist in our world. They're going to exist out there. And so that's how I'm feeling today. That's the stuff I'm thinking about today, and wanting to share with you guys. If you have any other thoughts on the topic, I always love hearing from you guys. So feel free to email me directly at info@BeccaLaurie.com. Excuse me. Or you can head right to my website, BeccaLaurie.com, and use the contact page there, which comes directly to me. While you're there, you can check out the newsletter and sign up for that. That's free. It's coming out real soon. And you can also check out all the other seminars that I've done, the course. You can see the Redbubble store, the Ko-Fi page, all of my writing, all of my social media. It's all right there at BeccaLaurie.com. And I do love hearing from you guys. So your thumbs up and your thumbs down mean the world to me here on YouTube. Your sharing of my videos means the world to me on YouTube. And also your comments, because it really allows me to continue the conversation when we're commenting on the videos themselves, and it lets me know kind of what your guys' thoughts are about the things that I've been talking about. Yes, Evie, it is a big, big topic, and it's been really bothering me. So I'm glad to be able to have finally kind of put something out there about it, because it's something we need to think about and we need to be aware of. And so that's what I have to share with you guys today. That's what we needed to talk about. I will be back on Sunday with Growing Gratitude. And then, of course, I'll be back next Wednesday with the next Being Becca Live. For those of you who follow Growing Gratitude, I hope you are listening and watching right now, because I don't know how else to put this information out there. I am going to move gratitude to 10 a.m. So I'm moving it 2 hours later in the morning on Sundays. So it used to be at 8 a.m. Growing Gratitude on Sundays. It will now be at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So for East Coasters, that'll be noon for you. Joe, I can't do your math. And so it'll be 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, and 12 noon East Coast time. So I'm just moving it those 2 hours because I don't have to work on Sundays anymore. I'm not going to be working the truck. I'm not going to be leaving the house really early in the morning. And I want to keep it on Sundays, but I just would like to do it a little later so I'm more awake and I can give you a little bit more during Growing Gratitude. Because this past Sunday, I was like, man, I am so tired. I can barely even talk, and let alone talk about my gratitudes. So I'm going to do a little kindness for myself, give myself an extra 2 hours to wake the brain before I do gratitude. So if you follow that, this Sunday, 10 a.m. MST. And then, of course, next Wednesday at 11 a.m. MST for the next Being Becca Live. Thank you guys so much for joining me and spending some time of the day with me. Oh, Bill says one last thing. Microaggressions are the enforcement mosquitoes of sameness. Their collective itch adds up to sustained trauma. Y'all take care. Thank you, Bill. That's what we need. We need some big old bug spray to like keep those microaggressions off of us. Because yes, it is. It's like little tiny bites all throughout your day, and it's very annoying by the end of the day. And so we need to deal with it. So thank you guys for joining me. I will see most of you on Sunday and the rest of you next Wednesday. And of course, I will see you out and about on the interwebs. Thank you guys for joining me. Bye. Have a great day.